So chapter 33 and verse number 12 will start. Now we've moved on from the three friends. What were the three friends' names? Remember that? What were the three in order? Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, right? And they had the arguments 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, right? He would argument. Then it went round 2, 1, 2, 3. The third round, Eliphaz went. Then Bildad had about 6 verses, and Zophar didn't even try. They're done with it. And now we have a young guy that's come on the scene, and his name is Elihu. Now he's going to talk. I think you start at chapter 32. Is it 32? Yeah, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. 2, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. Yeah. 6 chapters. And then chapter 38, that's when God will begin to speak. And by the way, I don't know if the book is like this for a reason, but you just wore out on these arguments, I mean, he said, well, God, why do you write all this down? And he says, because, so let me make sure you know this. They keep arguing the same thing. I want to write this because it's a principle. They will argue the same argument every time, the same thing over and over. Here it is. Expecting a different outcome. And that's the problem. You know what? You say, you keep saying it over and over and over. It's like when you do something and you think it's going to, if I do it long enough, it'll be better. It's going to be the same every time, No matter how many times you wash in a tub and you're dirty, you're going to have dirt in the bottom when you finish. It's just, you keep thinking, do the same thing, it's affecting a different outcome. They keep arguing this point as if it'll change it. As much as they could not change Job, is that the way you are? Are you persuaded? Do they change you? Have they worn you out? Job's pretty much worn them out. And they just gave up on it. But now Elihu, remind yourself, he's the young guy, right? Very young, and he's pretty arrogant. And he began in chapter 33, if you look, before I get to that point, in verse number 8, surely thou hast spoken in my hearing, and I have heard the voice of thy words, saying, I am clean without transgression, I am innocent. Now, if you've read chapter 1 and 2, you know that Job never brought this on himself, did he? He never brought this on himself. And Elihu says, okay, I've heard you. You've spoken. And you says, I am clean without transgression. I am innocent. There's no iniquity in me. Job never said that. Job just understands, I didn't bring this on myself. And he knows that. It's not me, but Elihu thinks he already knows. And he's already told his 3 friends. He said, I'm angry with Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar because y'all couldn't convince Job. Now, Job, I'm mad with you because of what you're doing, because you just will not listen. He took all that whole chapter just to introduce himself. And he says, well, you talk about God. You're not without, behold it. Verse 11, he putteth my feet in the stocks. And then he says, behold, in this thou art not just. Job, you say you have no sin, and you're not right. You are not a righteous person. And so I'm here to help you. Remember chapter 32. He introduces himself. I'm so-and-so. I'm this. I got this, and I won't do it. And then he finally gets to the meat of what he's saying. Job, you keep saying you ain't done nothing wrong, but you have. And I know you have. So I know in this, you're just not a just man. I will answer thee that God is greater than man. For God is greater than man. I'll tell you, God is bigger than man. You won't admit the truth. But God is greater than man. Verse number 13. In the book of Job, chapter 33, verse 13, Elihu is speaking to Job. Why dost thou strive against him? For he giveth not account of any of his matters. Why in the world do you fight against God? You know, God didn't have to give an account to you for nothing he says or whatever he does. Job, you're wrong. I mean, how would it be to have somebody to tell you over and over that you're wrong, that you're no good? You know, I'm sure Job's just kind of taken aback that here's a young man. By the way, Job's got to be an old man. And by the way, he's a righteous man. Can you imagine? Look at it. It's like you got some great dignitary who's in the middle of all this, like Billy Graham is in the middle of all this trouble and trial, somebody well respected, and some young guy's trying to tell him how he's a bad sinner. I know you don't know nothing about this. And you're like, you look at this, you're like, because you know Job's right. Well, this is all about what Lord challenged Satan because he was a righteous man. He says, why do you do this, Job? God don't have to give an account for himself. For God speaketh once, he hates twice, yet a man perceiveth it not. God doesn't have to explain. Verse 14, God does not have to explain himself, Job. No. He says, in a dream, in the vision of night, when deep sleep falls upon man. He says, when slumbering on their bed, then he opens the ears of men. That's the way God is. Verse 17, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man. God does this to try to get you right, Job, and you're not listening. That's what he's implying here. He is chastened. He keepeth back his soul from the pit, and his life from perishing by the sword. He is chastened also with pain upon his bed, and the multitude of his bones with strong pain. What is he saying here? God spoke you in your dreams, but look at the pain you're going through. Job, just going through all this shit. God's trying to get your attention. You're suffering. Won't you listen to God? You know you're wrong. You see what you're suffering? And that's really how he's presented.
When it says the soul, I mean the pit, it means hell, right?
The what now?
When it says the pit, it means
yeah.
hell.
In other words, it says God's trying to keep you from hell, son. He says, Job, God's trying to keep you from hell. And he's put you in all this pain to try to get you to turn and do right.
He was just telling that on his own. God didn't tell him to tell that.
No. This is him making an argument from himself. Now, again, in the argument, there's lie and truth. There's a lot of truth to what this man says. There's a lot of truth. When you read what he's saying, he says a lot of things that are true. And God does do that. God does chasten those he loves. He does try to warn us. But Job doesn't need warning because he hadn't done anything wrong. We know the backstory. Job doesn't know it. Elihu doesn't know it. But God said, hey, Satan, if you consider my servant Job, hey, there's nobody like him. Well, you can touch him, but don't do so-and-so. Okay, you can do this, but you can't do this. But God even said himself, he's a perfect man, upright, one that fears God, eschews evil. Even God said it. But this guy is saying, no, you are all this trouble you're going through, the multitude of his bones, the strong pain, so that his life abhorreth bread and his soul dainty meat. His flesh is consumed away that it cannot be seen. His bones that are not seen stick out. In other words, he's talking about suffering. Job, you're suffering because you've done wrong. That's pretty much the idea here, right? Yeah, his soul draweth near unto the grave, and his life to the destroyers. In other words, you're on the point of death because of this. If there be a messenger with him, an interpreter of one among the thousand, to show unto man his uprightness, then he is gracious unto him, and saith, deliver him from the ongoing down to the pit. I have found a ransom. No, Job's not going to admit he's wrong. It would help him. You know, if you would just say what's right, if you'll just do the right thing, tell God, send a messenger, tell him the truth. But you know what happens? Job is right. He says that his flesh shall be fresher than a child's. He shall return to the days of his youth. Yeah, if you'll just admit that your sin, all bad things go away. He shall pray unto God, and he will be favorable unto him, and he shall see his face with joy, for he will render to his man his righteousness. Yeah, if you'll do what's right, if you'll just admit your sin, God will be gracious. He shall pray unto God, and he will be favorable unto him, and he shall see his face with joy, and he will render to him his righteousness. He looketh upon men. And if any say, I have sinned, and perverted that which is right, and it profited me not, he will deliver his soul from going to the pit. Yeah, if a man would say, hey, I messed up, I did wrong, then God would keep you from going to the pit or going to hell. Well, just tell the right thing, Job. Just go tell God, send a messenger to God. Tell God, I messed up, I'm a sinner. And these are true. When you confess your sins, is that not true? When you confess to the Lord, he keeps you from going to the pit. He does. But Job didn't have to confess because he hadn't done nothing. And he's convinced of it. He knows this. He says, look, he said, I have sinned, perverted the way to right. He will deliver his soul from going to the pit, and his life shall see the light. Well, all these things worketh God oft times with man. Yeah, God would do this for you, Job. Won't you do what's right? Please listen to me. He says, look, all these things worketh God oftentimes with man to bring back his soul from the pit, to be enlightened with the light of the living. God does that for you to get you right. All this that's happening to you is just God trying to get you to do right. He's not punishing you, Job. Your friends didn't know what was talking about, but I do. God's trying to get your attention. He wants you to get right with him. Mark well, O Job, hearken unto me, hold thy peace, and I'll speak. I mean, this is some giant of a Christian. By the way, there's nobody. Did not God say that there's no more holy man on the face of the earth? That there's none like him in the earth? Did not God say he's such a holy man? Even though that's how high he is. And here's some young guy who thinks he knows everything, that he's more righteous. If you just listen to me, I can tell you what's right. Just listen to me, I can help you. You know, you're an old man, but you just don't know what you're talking about. Boy, isn't that such a degrading thing to hear this young man talk like this? Now, you know what God said about Job. And here this man is saying, look, mark well, verse 31, hearken to me, hold thy peace and I'll speak. Job, it's like you can almost sense Job's trying to say, but hold your peace. You let me talk. I know what I'm talking about. You're ignorant. You don't know God. I know him. Yeah, it reminds me of a time in my life. People pay for stuff like that. You don't do God's people like that. And this man, of all the people to do like that, I ain't nothing, you're nothing. Hey, but you know what? God done said about this man. Wow. If thou hast anything to say, answer me. Speak, for I desire to justify thee. Remember what he told him earlier? He said, I'll speak for you. I'm going to try to help you, right? Job, I'm just trying to help you out. In verse number 6, behold, I am according to thy wish in God's stead. I also am formed out of clay. I'm here to try to help you. I'm like you. And then he tells him here, if thou hast anything to say, answer me. Speak. I desire to justify you. If not, hearken to me, hold thy peace, and I will teach thee wisdom. Well, ain't that arrogant? Hey, speak, tell me, and I'll try to help you. But if you don't want to say the right thing, then you just hush, shut your mouth, and I'll tell you the truth. That's just one of those. Now, have you ever met somebody that was says they're a godly person and like that? You and I have all met them kind of people. Like, can't tell them, well, I know so-and-so. Guy used to say that, well, my mama always said so. And I'm like, I don't care what your mama said. My daddy always said so-and-so. My daddy was preacher so-and-so, and he taught me, I don't care what your daddy said. What does the book say? It doesn't matter about me. You can't quote another man. You got to quote what God said. And this guy is telling this man, I know God better than you. And you know the back line, right? You've been behind the curtains. You know the back. Oh, my goodness. Job is a good man, ain't he? Yeah. Can you imagine what he's saying here? Job's telling the truth. He was telling the truth all along. We know that. So when you listen to this guy speak like this, you're like, oh, my goodness. I can't believe that man talking to Brother Job like that. Somebody will stand up for Brother Job. God's going to come in and say something, won't he? Yeah, God will say something. Well, let's move on. And furthermore, Elihu answered and said, hear my words, O you wise men, and give ear unto me, you that have knowledge. In other words, he's being sarcastic. You that say you're smart, you think you got knowledge? For the ear trieth words as the mouth tasteth meat. That's pretty good. He said the ear tests words like the palate tastes food, like the mouth tastes the food. Let us choose to us judgment. Let us know among ourselves what is good. You know, look what? For Job had said, I am righteous, and God hath taken away my judgment. Should I lie against my right? My wound is incurable without transgression. What man is like Job, who drinketh up scorning like water? I mean, he looks at Job and he says, Job, you say that you're right. I am righteous, and God takes away my judgment. And Elihu said, well, should I lie against my right? My wound is incurable. What man is like Job, who drinketh up scorn like water? What else does he do? Which goeth in company with the workers of iniquity and walketh with wicked men. That's what you are, Job. You just a wicked man. You walk with wicked men. That's how we know you're wicked. You drink up scorn. Yeah. He says you drink scorn like water. For he had said, it profiteth me nothing that he should delight himself in God. Job said this, it don't do me no good to delight in God because it don't profit me nothing. Job didn't say that. No. Job, he's talking for Job, and Job didn't say that. Job said one thing, but this is what I heard when he said it. Have you ever done that before? You say something and you mean it one way, and some people take it the wrong way and they get offended. Yeah. Well, they get offended. That's everybody today, right? You know, he said she, and I'm a he. That's violence against me. I'm talking you to court, or I'm gonna make you lose your job, or you're gonna, just offend. By the way, have you ever seen people so offended as we see now? Everybody's offended. But you know who's not being offended? God. Oh, nobody's hurt God. Nobody's hurt God. Nobody's saying anything to God. He's the one that's being offended, right? Well, I tell you, but this man, no, he's trying to tell Job off. He says in verse 10, therefore, hearken unto me, ye men of understanding, far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should commit iniquity. No, God will always do what's right. Well, that's true. For the work of a man shall he render unto him, and cause every man to find it according to his ways. Now, what he's saying here is what we read in Galatians 6 and 7, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. But it's out of the context. He's saying, no. God will take from a man if he does wrong. Sure, he says, a man and makes man to find reward according to his way. Whatever you do, you're going to reap it according to his ways, right? He calls every man to find according to his ways. Yea, surely God will not do wickedly, neither will the Almighty pervert judgment. That's right. God wouldn't do that. Verse number 13. Who hath given him a charge over the earth? Who hath disposed the whole world? If he set his heart upon man, if he gather him to himself, his spirit and his breath, all flesh shall perish together, and man shall turn again unto dust. No, nobody goes against God. God does as he pleases, and God will not do wrong. He will not pervert justice. So he's making the argument to tell Job and remind him how God really is. This is the way the Lord is. And it would be turned to dust. Verse 16. If now thou hast understanding, hear this. Hearken to the voice of my words. Shall even he that hateth right govern? And wilt thou condemn him that is most just? Right? Job, you're condemning God. You're not admitting you're a sinner. You've sinned against God. You've been against him. God won't pervert justice. He doesn't do that. But you're against God, Job. Wilt thou condemn him that is, you're condemning God who is most just. Is it fit to say to a king, thou art wicked, and to princes you are ungodly? How much less to him that accepteth not the person of princes, nor regardeth the rich more than the poor, for they are all the work of his hands. He says, you wouldn't say that against a king or a prince, but you're saying this against God, Job. You're perverting God. God's a right God. And you're saying that God didn't do that. No, God's done me wrong. You're wrong, Job. Is it fit to say to a king you are wicked? But you're saying God, he's wicked because he has punished you for no reason. Now, from Elihu's standpoint, God is punishing Job for no reason. Because Job is saying, I'm being punished and I have no reason for it. That's sacrilege. Because God don't do that. And you are degrading God by saying that. Because God wouldn't pervert justice. He don't ever hurt nobody that ain't done wrong. So let's read that again, because this is the argument. He says, is it fit? Chapter 34, verse 18. Is it fit to say to a king, thou art wicked, and to princes, you are ungodly? How much less to him that accepts not the person? No, you're doing these wrong things. No, you can't be like that. No, in a moment shall they die, and the people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away, and the mighty shall be taken away with a hand. No. Job, you're wrong, telling God that he's wrong. You're saying God's punishing you for no reason, and God don't do that. Verse number 21. For his eyes, God's eyes, are upon the ways of man, and he seeth all his goings. There is no darkness, nor shadow of death, where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves. God doesn't punish good people. He punishes bad people. Yeah, for he will not lay upon a man more than right, that he should enter into the judgment of God. Well, that's true, right? He shall break in pieces mighty men without number and set others in their stead. Yeah, God does that. He takes the wicked people out of his sight. Yeah, therefore he knoweth their works, and he returneth them in the night, so that they are destroyed. He striketh them as wicked men in the open sight of others. Yeah, God does that. Now, you say, well, he's making a good argument. I'd say he's right. This is that, I wish I could say it 1,000 times. I'd love to say it over and over. When I look at arguments, I can look at things like this. We look at good and bad, right? There's good. There's bad. And that's easy. But usually what you get presented to you is this. There's good and bad. Good and good. There's bad and good. And then there's bad and bad. Somebody else says, what in the world are you doing? What I'm trying to tell you, it gets complicated when two people are talking. Okay, I got those. Those are pretty easy. But sometimes people meet good with bad. There's people that's good with good. You wish it was all like that. But there are a lot of times, good, bad, bad, good, and it goes on and on. You don't know which is which. Satan has always been that way. He never will come out and say, hey, I'm the devil. He doesn't do that. He didn't walk out with a red suit on and a pitchfork and some horns. Oh, I got you. Okay, I'm not going to believe anything you have to say. It's not like that. He comes and he says, I'm going to tell you that, and there's a lot of truth to it. And then some lies mixed in too. And then there's some truth, and there's some lies. It's always like that. Much of what this guy is saying is absolutely true, but his foundation is wrong. He thinks that it's always that way. You reap what you sow. There's a general principle when you read that, but don't take it out of context. Did Jesus reap what he sowed?
No, because he didn't sin.
He didn't sin.
No.
Was he crucified? Yeah. And we think, well, I've done nothing wrong, so nothing bad's going to happen to me. It's not that way. You can't take that out of the context there and apply it to everything. That's what this guy is doing. He says, no, God's like this. He striketh the wicked as men and open not to others, because they turned their back from him, and he would not consider any of his ways, so that they caused the cry of the poor to come unto him, and he heareth the cry of the afflicted. Yeah, God punishes them because the cry of the poor. By the way, those of you who have been listening, we've been studying through the book of Exodus. Did you hear that the other night? You remember that story, that line about the poor? He says he said, when y'all get to the promised land, remember, you treat people right. And you got fatherless and widows, and you better do them right. Now, if you do them wrong, don't let them cry to me. Because if they cry to me and I hear it, it's going to be bad. Do you remember that when Exodus? Don't do it. If them widows cry to me, if them fatherless cry to me, I will get you. It's because God always takes that up. But his point is this. He's telling things about how God is. The poor will come to him. I ain't got time to go to Exodus. We can define that, but it's in there. He says, so when he giveth quietness, who then can make trouble? When God makes it quiet and peaceful for you, who can trouble you? And when he hideth his face, who then can behold him? Whether it be done against a nation or against a man. No. That he says that the hypocrite reign not, lest people be ensnared. Yeah, God doesn't tolerate hypocrites. God does hate hypocrites, doesn't he? Too many. He hates hypocrites. If anybody wants to know why was he always so, the worst word you'll ever hear Jesus ever say was directed to religious leaders. It wasn't against sinners. The most red hot scorching words ever said was to religious people, because they said they were godly people, but then they'd lead the people astray. He hates it. I'll spew you out of my mouth because you're lukewarm. Luke chapter 3 for the church at Laodicea. Same here. God has always been that way. Surely it is meet to be said unto God, I have borne chastisement. I will not offend anymore. That's what you do, Job. Get right with him. By the way, the final verse here, he's just telling Job this. Now listen to me. This is what you do. First, surely it is meet to be said unto God, I have borne chastisement. I will not offend anymore. Hey, God, I've taken my licks, and I won't sin anymore. Right? He says, that which I see not, teach thou me. If I've done iniquity, I will do no more. Tell God you're going to quit, Job. Should it be according to thy mind? He will recompense it, whether thou refuse or whether thou choose, and not I. Therefore speak what thou knowest. Let men understand and tell me, and let a wise man hearken unto me. Job had spoken without knowledge, and his words are without wisdom. If he just tell the truth, I promise you, all this would go away. I know it. I'm that smart. My desire is that Job may be tried unto the end because of his answers for wicked men. He represents the wicked men, and I hope he gets tried, right? I hope Job gets tried for what he has done. You know, he's going to get what's coming to him. For he addeth rebellion unto his sin. I'm some harsh words for poor old Job. He adds rebellion, and he clappeth his hands among us and multiplieth his words against God. On and on, we're reading about a man that's just being blasted by this young whippersnapper. This young man that says, I know it all. You can't tell me. I know what I'm doing. Don't tell me what I'm doing. Even if it's bad. I meant to do that. You know, that's that kind of a person. But he's telling him what he needs to do, what he needs to know. And Job, I'm going to help you. I'll get you right. So now he's finished, right? Nah, he's got more chapters to go. Elihu spake moreover. In other words, in addition to this, right? Thinkest thou this to be right, that thou saidest my righteousness is more than God's? Job, you say you're righteous, and your righteousness is more than God. God has done proven. Look at your trouble you're in. God has already said you ain't righteous. But you say you're righteous. You're better than God, Job. Is that what you're saying? For thou saidest, what advantage will it be unto thee? And what profit shall I have if I be cleansed from my sins? I will answer thee, and thy companions with thee. I'm going to tell you, friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, I'm going to tell all of you the truth about God. I'm going to let you in on what God really says. Let me explain it to you. Look into the heavens and see, Job 35, verse 5, and behold the clouds which are higher than thou. If thou sinnest, what dost thou against him? You look up. The other side of heavens, are you going to be against him? Or if your transgression be multiplied, what dost thou unto him? Job, can I tell you, God's above you. You can't be righteous like him. If thou be righteous, what givest thou him? Or what receiveth he of thine hand? How can you make it right with God? You can't. Thy wickedness may hurt a man as thou art, and thy righteousness may profit the son of a man. No. Your wickedness, it affects you. No, you're not the right kind of a man. But none saith, where is God, my maker, who giveth songs in the night, who teacheth us more than the beasts of the earth, and maketh us wiser than the fowls of the heaven? There they cry, but none giveth answer, because pride of evil men. That's why it is, Job. You're prideful. You won't admit the truth. That's what happens, and God doesn't answer you. That's why you're not hearing. Remember Job's argument? Why doesn't God come on the scene? Why doesn't God show up? Why don't God say something for me? But he maintains his integrity though, right? Surely God will not hear vanity, neither will the Almighty regard it, Job. You are the problem, and God is not going to listen to your vain talk. The Almighty won't regard it. Although thou sayest thou shalt not see him, yet judgment is before him, therefore trust thou in him. Get right with God, Job. You got justice here if you'll just do right. By the way, you get tired of the arguments, don't you? You get tired of hearing this. It's like over and over. They just, But he thinks he knows it. He thinks he knows more than anyone else. By the way, have you heard the arguments for abortion? Have you heard the people make the arguments for abortion? Well, if you don't do it, they're going to have them in the back alleys and places, and many of our women are going to die needlessly. You know, a woman has a right to her body. You know, and if it harms her, that's her right. All the arguments that I hear, I can remember a man telling me, well, what if she got pregnant for a man that's got a wrong color skin? That child would have a terrible life. Godly men, by the way. Do you know how many arguments are out there from people about abortion? And they make no sense. And they will argue that point and argue it to the nth degree, and they never shut their mouths. They will continue day and night, night and day. They don't get tired of saying it. By the way, do you know why people don't really get tired of telling this stuff? Because of what they want to do. It's what you like. This man obviously enjoys this. He's enjoying himself telling them all. Verse number 15, he says, but now, because it is not so, he hath visited in his anger. Yeah, because you ain't right, he's visited you in his anger, yet he knoweth it not to the great extremity. Therefore doth Job open his mouth in vain. He multiplies words without knowledge. You're just not where you should be, Job. You know, God has not punished you to the nth degree. He not overwhelmed you, but you still won't. He's giving you a chance to repent. That's the implication here. And he won't. He will not repent. All right, 36. I tell you, I was going to try to go through these because it's not it's repetition, but you can get the idea here. So in chapter 6, Elihu also proceeded. In other words, it's like he takes his breath and like, let me give me a drink of water. All right, let me keep on. Just let me tell you some more. Elihu, suffer me a little, and I will show thee that I have yet to speak on God's behalf. I got to talk for the Lord because you ain't helping him. These are the words I'm going to tell for the Lord. I will fetch my knowledge from afar and will ascribe righteousness to my Maker. He is righteous. Oh, God is mighty. Verse 5, and despises not any. He is mighty in strength and wisdom. He preserveth not the life of the wicked, but giveth right to the poor. He withdraweth not his eyes from the righteous, but with kings are they on the throne. Yea, he doth establish them forever, and they are exalted. And if they be bound in fetters and be holden in cords of affliction, then he showeth them their work and their transgressions, that they have exceeded. Right? If he does this, he warns them. He openeth also the ear to this discipline and commandeth that they return from iniquity. He punishes them. He tries to get them right. Verse 8, if they be found in fetters, holding in cords, guess what? He's showing them their work, their punishment. He's showing them what's wrong. And he's opening their ears to discipline and commanded them to return from their iniquity. If they obey and serve him, they shall spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasure. He said the same thing before. He's repeating himself over and over, expecting a different outcome. If they obey, but if they obey not, they shall perish by the sword and they shall die without knowledge. God is only trying to get you to turn around, Job. But you know what happens if you don't turn around? But the hypocrites, like you, who say you're righteous when you aren't, in heart heap up wrath. They cry not when he bindeth them. You don't even know what God's doing to you. You're not even crying out when he binds you up. You should know this. They die in youth, and their life is among the unclean. He delivereth the poor in his affliction, and openeth their ears in oppression. You just won't do it, Job. God tried to help you, but you're just a hypocrite. You are. You will not do what's right. Next verse, 16. Even so would he have removed thee out of the straight. He'd take you out of this, Job, into a broad place where there is no straightness, and that should be set on thy table should be full of fatness. But thou hast fulfilled the judgment of the wicked, judgment of justice to take hold on thee. No, if you would have removed out of there, if you would have gotten out of that mess and had done what was right, he'd have set before you fullness. But now what happens? Justice has taken hold on thee, because there is wrath. Beware lest he take thee away with his stroke. Then a great ransom cannot deliver thee. Be careful, Job. You're playing with fire. You're playing with God, and it's amazing God doesn't take you out of this world. Will he esteem thy riches? No, not gold, nor all the forces of his strength. No. Will he indeed do this for you? Will he take care of you? Will your riches, will that help you? Desire not the night when people are cut off from their place. Take heed. Don't you regard iniquity, for this hast thou chosen rather than affliction. You have chosen this way, Job. You've chosen affliction. You've chosen this way. It's your fault. That's where you've gotten to. And finally, verse number 22. Behold, God exalted by his power. Who teaches like him? Who hath enjoined him his way? Or who can say, thou hast wrought iniquity? Remember that thou magnifiest work which men behold. Every man may see it. Man may behold it afar. He's speaking about God and how great and righteous he is. You remember, though, thou magnifiest work which men behold. Every man may see it and behold it afar off. Remember, magnify his work, Job. Behold, God is great, and we know him not. Neither can we number his years and be searched out. God is that great, Job. For he maketh small the drops of water. They pour down rain according to the vapor thereof. Here is God, which clouds do drop and distill upon man abundantly. Also, can any understand the spreadings of the clouds, or the noise of the tabernacle? Behold, he spreadeth his light upon it, and covereth the bottom of the sea. For by them judgeth he the people, he giveth meat in abundance. With clouds he covereth the light, and commandeth it not to shine by the cloud that cometh betwixt it. In other words, Job, that's how great he is. You never can make clouds do that. The noise thereof showeth concerning it, and the cattle also concerning vapor, the water. Nothing can be done against God. He's going to do like he pleases, and if you knew who he was, you wouldn't. He's simply saying you wouldn't act like this. You'd be a righteous man and just admit the truth. And finally, we get to this last one of Elihu, this young man who is just pouring out all this. By the way, remember how before he had Eliphaz would speak, then Job had a chance to speak. Each one had a chance. He ain't giving Job a chance to speak, is he? Not at all. Huh? It's almost like it's almost like you can hear Job wanting to say something, but he ain't got a chance to. This guy is just, he's unlike the other friend. He's just arrogant. Any other questions, comments? All right, let's go to 37. At this also my heart trembleth and is moved out of its place. Job, let me tell you where I'm at. I'm at a point now. Hear attentively the noise of his voice and the sound that goeth out of his mouth. Job, I'm trying to help you. He directeth under the whole heaven, and his lightning unto the end of the earth. After it a voice roareth. He thundereth with the voice of his excellency, and he will not stay them. When his voice is heard, God thundereth marvelously with his voice. Great things doeth he, which we cannot comprehend. My heart trembles and it's moved out of its place. Listen, Job, you hear the noise of his voice, the sound that goes forth. The whole heaven is lightning to the ends of the earth. His voice roareth, thundereth. He's talking about the awesomeness of God. Think about it, Job. My heart trembles before this here. Absolutely. When God speaks, notice he says the sound of his voice in verse number 2. And he says after verse 4, his voice roareth. Verse number 5, mark his voice. Verse 6, for he saith to the snow, be thou on the earth, likewise to the small rain, and to the great rain of his strength. He sealeth up the hand of every man, that all men may know his work. Then the blasts go into the dens. Boom, be some serious. Sorry, my contacts are fogging up. He sealeth up the hand of every man, that all the men know his work. Then the beasts go into the dens and remain out of their places. By the way, this is just referring how awesome God is. Out of the south cometh the whirlwind, and cold out of the north. By the breath of God frost is given, and the breath of the waters is straitened. And by watering he wearieth the thick cloud. He scattereth his bright cloud, and it is turned round about by his counsels, that they may do whatsoever he commandeth them upon the face of the world in the earth. By the way, you know what Job's doing right now? Probably thinking what's going to come on football's coming on Sunday, what's going to come on tomorrow. He ain't paying attention. You can guess he ain't paying attention to this. I can tell you, I'm sure Job has turned this guy off a long time ago. You know, I'm sure he had to. Because you don't find any reference to this man anymore. But anyway, he's just speaking of how great God is. He causeth it to come, whether for correction or for his land, for his land, or for mercy. Whatever he does it his way. And finally, hearken unto this, O Job. You know, I did read one writer said that none of the other friends called Job by his name. Maybe a reference to like it was kind of disrespectful to speak for a man his name, especially for a young man. You know, what was that movie? We talk about the man. Remember McClintock? Anybody watch McClintock? Who's the Western guys in?
Yeah.
Some folks call me so and so. Young men like you call me Mister. Well, I reckon I should call you Mister. Remember that line? We did. I found. You ever find them old letters? I found these old letters, Mr. and Mrs. And it says, I can tell you, this is how wonderful it was back then. And I didn't even recognize it. My grandfather was Wardell Harris. His wife's name was Maggie. Mr. and Mrs. Wardell Harris. And letters would be addressed to her, Mrs. Wardell Harris. The letter would be addressed. I found some of that stuff. I was like, goodness, is that the way it was back then? Wow. And they didn't, and you know what it was back then. If a woman walked in the room, you stood up. You held the door. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. Every senior citizen, if grown people were talking as a child, were you allowed to speak?
No.
You didn't speak. In fact, they would tell me, make yourself scarce. That word we use. This guy does not respect Job. And he tells him, hey, Job, listen to me. Hearken to me this, verse 14. And consider wondrous works of God. Dost thou know when God disposed them and caused the light of his cloud to shine? Dost thou know the balancing of the clouds, the wondrous works of him, which is perfect in knowledge? Job, you don't know God. How thy garments are warm when he quieted the earth with the south wind. Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong, and has molten looking glass? Job, you just don't know who God is. You really, you don't know God. You just don't. Teach us what we shall say unto him. We cannot order our speech by reason of darkness. Shall it be told him that I speak? If a man speaks, surely he shall be swallowed up. You can't talk to God like that. You can't speak to God in that way you are, Job. And now men see not the bright light which is in the clouds, but the wind passeth and cleanseth them. Fair weather cometh out of the north, and God is his terrible majesty. With God is terrible majesty. Touching the Almighty, we cannot find him out. He's excellent in power, and in judgment, and in plenty of justice. He will not afflict. Men do therefore fear him. He respecteth not any that are wise of heart. By the way, most of those are absolute truths. Just truth. But it wasn't true with God. Well, true with Job. So we finished Elihu and all his responses, okay? I want to tell you, this is the way it is, okay? I'm going to write this. So you're going to build a house. You remember we used to build a house, right? Y'all remember that drawing those? You draw it like this here, remember? And you put your little window right there, right? And you put your door right there. We always put one in the attic. Okay, for those of us who remember how to draw a house. By the way, but any house that is built begins with what? Foundation. Foot. You got to make a foundation. What happens when the foundation is wrong? It doesn't matter how you do it. You know, they said they made a guy made a postmodern house. And if you ever seen ever read about postmodernism, and you look at what a postmodern building would be, it has no meaning, right? How many of you have ever been to Pigeon Forge and you see that house that's upside down or built that's crooked and built a certain way, right? It looks really bad, doesn't it? How many of you have ever framed up helped frame a house? You know there are certain laws they did not go against, did they? It looks like it's like that. Nah, it's got to have a foundation and it's sure. But because if you don't have the right foundation, it doesn't matter how many things you put here. You can put the walls, you can put the door, you can put the windows, you can put the roof, but without the foundation, the rest doesn't matter. That's the argument so far against Job. Wonderful arguments, but they all had the wrong foundation. This is why God gives us in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11, no other foundation can any man lay than that which is laid, which is Christ Jesus. When you make an argument, when you start with the wrong standpoint, it doesn't matter. The argument against abortion, you go at it and you say this, well, you know what? Abortion is murder. And I know that's why. May I ask you to argue it a different way? Argue from this standpoint. God said that's a sin. You can't do it. No matter whether it's murder or not. It's a sin. Thou shalt commit murder. Everything you and I know is right and wrong is not about, well, it makes sense to me. Because sometimes you'll get in situations, you're going to try to reason it out. And if you're not working spiritually and thinking that way, you will come up with your own ideas. The best argument I ever say is this, what does the Lord say about it? Because sometimes you may think you got the right answer, as Brother Glenn used to say, and I thought I knew the right way. Thou shalt not kill. I was 15, 16 years old, and I was, brother, that ain't the book. No, that's wrong. Capital punishment's absolutely wrong. Why? Because God says you don't kill. But I wasn't reading the scriptures, was I? God says you're not supposed to kill, but God can. And then when you read the scripture, you know what he says? You know what the government is? He's my minister. It says very clearly, Romans 13, verses 1 through 5. For he is the minister of God. In the Old Testament, when God said, Saul, I want you to kill the Amalekites, was it a sin? No, I'm not doing this. I ain't doing it. God told me to do it. That makes it okay. That's how the government, God has never changed. So what do we do think? Well, God said it's wrong. It's wrong. That argument can be made, you know. Otherwise, you start making excuses for how you look at things. So God, what did the Lord say about it? And then well, what did the Lord say? It doesn't matter why. It doesn't have to make sense with God, right? You know, God in the Bible, much of the time, God never tells you so you'll understand it. All he will say is, I want you to do so and so. And you ask why, and he won't tell you, will he? I just want you to do it. Remember he told Ezekiel, I want you to go down to the river, and I want you to bury this thing in a cave. Ezekiel, I want you to cut this hole in the wall and put all your belongings through it in the middle of the night. Okay. I want you, hey, mighty man of valor, you're going to lead the people. Me? I mean, things that don't make sense. And it's not about the reasoning of it. Be careful about reasoning. These people are reasoning from the wrong foundation. Now, we just heard Elihu just boom, 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 boom. And what happens next? Then the Lord answered Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, Elihu. Who does he answer? Job. Job, can I speak to you, man? Finally. I mean, you can imagine this. You just think about it. He comes in and God's going to take him to the woodshed. God's going to, and he's like, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you. I don't care. God's, oh, you know, it's one of those times you're like, I don't want to get beat. I'm going to get tore up. I'm out here. It's dark. I know my mama finds me. I can't find my way home. I'm going to get beat, but I'll be so glad to get home. I don't care. I'm just glad, you know, that kind of thing, you know. He's so glad God shows up. But God answers him how? Out of the whirlwind. Same thing that killed his kids, isn't it? God answered Job out of the whirlwind. What was Job's argument with God? But Lord, why don't you help me? Why don't you come? Why don't you assist me? Why don't you talk to me? So he answered him out of the world and said, who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Now, the friends all had their arguments. They had the wrong foundation. You know what God is saying? Same thing they said. You don't know who I am. But Lord, we said that. No, but you were saying he had sinned. He ain't done nothing. But he really doesn't know who I am, so I need to explain myself. Because you know what Job's question is? Why does this happen to me? Why does this happen to me? Who is this? Wait a minute, Job. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, and I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. In other words, Job, who do you think you are? You question what I'm doing? You gird up your loins. You get ready. You answer me. You stand up like a man. And I'm going to ask you a question. And you're going to answer me. Why, you know, that's God speaking to Job. Well, what about my friends over here? All this here. No. That's the way God is with you and I. We know where we're at. But I didn't do nothing wrong. Yeah, you did. You're wondering why in the world something's happened to you. You know I'm taking care of you. You know I watched after you. Don't you know I take care of everything? Do you really need to hear from me? And we got that from the Garden of Gethsemane. Do you need to hear from God? No. I know what his will is. Is that sufficient? Yep. Remember that chapter 3? He rant and raved about it. Remember chapter 3? He rants and raves about the cursed day was born, and you gird up now thy loins like a man, and I will demand of thee. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Job, by the way, you know the earth, everything has foundations, right? You see, we look at things and we think that the stars are just, what holds the stars in midair? They're not in air. What holds them in the space? Why don't they move? Well, there's an attraction to what? By the way, have you noticed that? We have right now an earth and a moon. And everybody knows what's the action of besides light, what does the moon do for the earth? The tides. Our tides come because of the moon, right? Gravitational pull, right? How do we end up going around the sun? Gravitational pull, right? So how does everything stay where it's at? Gravity is acting upon it. There's an attraction, right? Well, it's attracted to this other object. Well, that's attracted to this other object. Okay? So what are they attracted to? There's something else. They just don't know, do they? What does it hang on? God hangs the stars. He puts them there. What holds them where they're at? By the way, Every scientist will tell you they know that the Earth has to be at a certain axis, if it any other way, it just falls apart. So many degrees of the axis, and it has to turn the right amount. How did it end up like that? And if you believe in evolution or the Big Bang Theory, look up Neptune. Was it Uranus or Neptune? I think it's Neptune. You know how the Earth spins around and around, and all the planets spin? It spins the opposite way. If it all comes the same way, why is it spinning the wrong way? And they've tried to answer that for years. We'll finish this. Now God speaks. Now we'll get, so let's stop there. We'll pick up there. We'll just start verse number 1, chapter 38 next week, okay? Thank you, brother. Let's stand, we'll have a word of prayer and be dismissed. Thank you. Thank you for your time. But at least now we're getting to Job's response, and God's response.